Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. It's finally happening again, Matt. Conferences are going to expand, so that's going to be the bulk of our show, but had some NFL points to highlight off the top. It seems like Steelers GM has been hinting that this is Ben Roethlisberger's last year. My man Tom Brady was throwing footballs into his jugs machine, Matt. Did you see that? It was coming right back. It was perfect.
I tell you what, as I saw it, I was like, please tell me that there are people out there that are just out there just believing that is true.
But hold on. Has he done that before? Because I swear I've seen it. And so I didn't know if me and Tom were just on the same brain wavelength where I had dreams about it and I knew that he was going to post that video, or if he had done that before. Because maybe I had actually came up with the idea, and in my dream I just talked to Tom, and he said, you know what, that is a brilliant video. I'm going to make that. Because that could have happened.
Well, this was the funny part to it, is that after the video was released, there was like a couple of news stories that were like, this is truly a fake video. Do not try to throw a football into the jugs machine. But
see, the thing is, how would those journalists debunk it? Do you think they went outside and tried to throw a football into the jugs machine? Because, to be honest, if it wasn't on, he might be able to throw one in there. Someone turns it on and then it shoots it out, because isn't there usually a delay anyway? It's not like it's spinning all the time. Although I could be getting confused with the baseball ones. Because I think sometimes they have to warm up, though, right? So, I don't know. You never know, Matt. I want to see them try to debunk it. I want to see one of these journalists go out there and try to throw the football into it to see if it works. Because there's honestly no way they would have to be looking for frame edits or something. But why not try it? What's the worst that can happen? I mean, you saw with the last one where he knocked the machine over in the video. It's not like you're going to hit it and it's instantly going to come back at your face like 100 miles an hour.
Or will it? And
you can't move out of the way? Because it's a football. It's not a baseball, so it's not coming 100 miles an hour back at you. So if you have a machine, try it. I mean, your high school or whatever might not be happy with it. I mean, you're the coach. If your quarterback broke the machine to being a Tom Brady, you'd be pretty mad about it, right?
Yes, I'd be very mad if we had a jugs machine.
So I hope he listens, and I hope he tries that. You guys don't have one, though? We had the baseball ones.
Yeah, we don't have the football jugs machine yet.
Yeah, because it is different. That's what I don't know. So to be honest, I don't know if I've ever seen one, or at least used one, because they have a different spin. Although I wonder if you can sometimes just tilt it a little bit so it's different. I don't know. That's my last speculation on that. My other big NFL topic, Matt, Aaron Rodgers. It leaked out after months of discussion where he said it wasn't about the money, that he wanted a salary that matched Patrick Mahomes. And so people were slamming him. But I almost wonder if that was his offer to the Packers. Like he said, I'm so unhappy here. The only way I would stay is if I was the highest paid guy. And they were like, well, we're going to leak this to the press because that's very disrespectful. You know? I just don't see, when he was talking about how he wants to go for a championship, I think it makes more sense that was the direction that he took. Yo, I need the extra money. Please put that up front. And then they were like, you know what? Maybe we can work it out. He wanted a 2-year deal. It looks like, I don't know if it actually went through, but it looks like they're going to do a 1-year deal. And so, if you're Love, how do you feel at quarterback? You were the guy a month ago. They were publicly telling you're the guy. And then they're like, you know what, though? 1 more year of Aaron Rodgers. That's 1 less year that he has to get ready and play in the NFL. It's almost like they're ready to move on from him already.
Well, I almost think it's the same deal that Haskins and Rudolph are looking at right now with Pittsburgh. Yes, Roethlisberger's there, but how long, even with an extra regular season game, is he going to play all of them?
Well,
highly doubt it.
To be fair, though, those guys did have their chance. Haskins is still having off-the-field issues. Rudolph had basically an entire season, and he didn't prove it. I know he's probably going to get a little bit better, but I haven't seen anything from him that's beyond a journeyman backup. You know what I mean?
But you're still looking at it like they're both in the wings on the verge of being able. Like Rodgers has what, another year or two. I mean, he may end up leaving Green Bay after that deal.
Yeah, because he's probably still going to play later. I don't see a reason why he wouldn't. I mean, you get to one of those other venues where it's like not as cold. You're not outside all the time. Let's see, because he's only, what's his age? He's 37. I thought he was 38. So he would probably play at least till he's 40, I would think. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe he would just retire. I don't know. The last other thing that I saw, because I know we brought it up before, Deshaun Watson showed up for training camp. And a lot of people were giving pushback, saying like, well, isn't he under investigation? But still, our country is innocent until proven guilty. Nothing has happened. I think as soon as he showed up, maybe I have my days wrong because I saw the news article. I don't know if it came up before he got there or not. But 2 other women filed against him. And at this point, it's like, why isn't this moving faster? Like, you're letting him out there in the public. If he is a danger, like, what are you doing? And then the Texans, I mean, like, the NFL, they can't do anything. I think that was basically their statement they came out. They're in a situation where it's like, we're working with the police department, and they're investigating, so we're just going to do nothing that interferes. And we're just going to, I mean, he has to play. It's a public guy. He's innocent right now. So,
and I agree with that statement, but at the same time, how many other players are there some kind of incident and the NFL feels that they have to grandstand and make some kind of move on it? And I feel like Watson's getting a special privilege because he's a quarterback compared to if he was an outside linebacker or someone else like that.
Pac-Man Jones?
He's had multiple opportunities. But honestly, like if it were him, he's automatically suspended until they find out whatever's going on with him.
I mean, Ray Lewis was in that murder investigation, didn't seem to harm his career.
Right. But they've also had other instances where guys are like immediately removed until all that legal stuff is cleared.
I'm just pointing out that I don't think it's the position. I think it's when you're talented enough that they selectively overlook. They're like, hey, Ray, you willing to do some deer antler spray? He says, yeah. And then they're like, all right, we'll forget about this incident. Deshaun Watson, they're like, hey, can you save another franchise that we like if we potentially move you? You're like, yeah. All right. Just sit tight. What if Aaron Rodgers leaves and then Deshaun Watson goes to Green Bay?
Well, did you see what the Texans set for his trade value?
No.
It was like, I believe it was either 5 or 7 picks, and 3 of them had to be first rounders, is what they set the value for trading for Watson.
Too high.
I concur.
I mean, there's nothing that they can put. They can say that that's the value, but they're not going to get that. And I wonder, no team's going to touch him now anyway. So it's a weird situation for them. They're stuck. I mean, until you get that innocent rolling, or the charges are all dropped, which I think would probably be the fastest, is if everything was just dropped by the police department because they didn't have enough evidence or whatever. I mean, a year ago they were talking about having text messages. That obviously went nowhere because you would have thought that it would have been rolling a lot faster than what it is. So I have to think that it's going to blow over. But that's just my thoughts on it. I mean, a couple additional girls came forward. Maybe they have the evidence that they have enough to press charges or to actually go through with it. I don't know. I don't know too much about the legal, how it goes through. But I know you can just make the allegation, but when it comes time to do it in the court, you have to back it up. Otherwise, it's just going to get thrown out. Anything else on the NFL before we move on?
Did you see the quarterback that I would like to see at Pittsburgh put out?
Minshew?
Yeah.
No, what did he put out?
Did you see how he's preparing for the upcoming season?
What's he doing?
He said, in preparation for the competition, I haven't taken a shit in weeks. Number 2 isn't an option for me.
Jeez, dude. Do you know how well that would go for in Pittsburgh?
It would go awesome with people waving their terrible towel.
They probably want. They would eat it up.
They want a competitor.
I told you they love Tommy Gunn, dude, based on that Rocky movie. He didn't even win in the movie.
A perfect fit.
Yeah.
And now that they have Najee Harris, it's the perfect system. Make it happen.
You got to get into the game. I mean, running backs, you got to deliver. We don't know how good he is until I see him on an NFL field. But we'll be getting into NFL stuff next week as training camps and stuff are underway. But let's get into the big topic, because I wanted to hit on this, spend most of the show on it. It was actually one of the reasons why we originally talked about doing a podcast, it was like 10 years ago now, Matt, that I think the conferences started to move around. We'd hang out and like draft up who we thought would move where, because it seemed like everything was going to expand back then, and it kind of just stopped. And that was before I even went to Michigan, had student tickets, went to the Big House and stuff. So I was more looking local down here, like who has a chance to join the SEC? Is it going to be NC State? Are they going to stay in the ACC? Is maybe East Carolina has a chance? Because they were pretty big before. Then they've fallen off a good bit after a couple coaching changes. But right now, the big news that came out, Oklahoma and Texas, they announced less than a week after it leaked, but I want to go through the entire timeline. They announced that they're going to go to the SEC. They applied for membership. That's their goal by 2025. So how it worked is, back when all this happened, like a decade ago, most conferences kind of had TV rights, but the Big Ten had signed like their Big Ten network. So whenever you sign that, you give over your television rights or whatever for a certain period of time. So the Big Ten started it, and they make more money than any other conference. So the SEC started their own network. The Big 12 tried to, and instead Texas just started their own Longhorn network. I don't know if people remember that, because it was kind of a bust. And so right now they still had some of their games signed over to the Big 12 network, and which I don't even think is a network. I just think that means just Fox. But that ends on 2025. So 4 years from now? I honestly think if they want to leave, they're going to get out earlier. But what are your initial thoughts on the move?
I was actually surprised that they pushed for it, because I thought, when you look at where those two schools are right now, like Oklahoma, they're in the driver's seat in the conference. So I find it surprising that they would want to get out when you have that. I mean, basically, as long as you don't stub your toe, you're in the driver's seat competing for one of those playoff spots every year, and they've been a playoff team. So why would you challenge the status quo? And for Texas, you're not even competing. You're not even above 500 in what people think is a weak Big 12. What makes you think, oh yeah, I want to go to the SEC? Like, how does that turn out better? It's like they forget that they haven't been relevant. They've said that they're like Miami. They say that they're back, but they haven't been back since 25 years ago.
Matt, so I honestly think it's a little bit of jealousy over Texas A&M, because I tried to research some stats for this show, because it's been a while since I looked into this, because I honestly didn't think it was going to come this year. I thought that a lot of the TV rights, because we talked about this, the Big 12, it was only a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, they applied to kind of throw feelers out there to see which networks were going to be interested in their next TV deal, and they kind of were told, no, we got to talk to the Big Ten and the SEC first. And so I'm sure that just triggered Texas. So whenever there's been some conflicting reports about how this has been going under and how it's been planned for 6 months, I don't buy that. There might have been, the wheels have probably been moving about the Big 12 probably falling apart for 6 months, but I honestly believe that they looked into their own deal first, because I don't think Texas wanted to give up the Longhorn Network. If they join the SEC, I don't think the SEC is going to let them keep that, because they split their money evenly. The Big 12 didn't. They let Oklahoma and Texas make more money, and they even threw out a counteroffer that was reported last week. I don't know how big it was, but they were offering them even more money. A conference that's stable doesn't do that. Like, people forget, the ACC did that same exact thing to help Florida State out, remember? Like, Florida State was ready to leave. There were rumors that they might even join the Big 12 when Maryland left. And so the ACC just paid them off. They paid their debt or whatever. I don't even remember how. I tried to look up to see how much it was, and you can't find any articles on it, but I know that happened. So that might have just been some whitewashing from ESPN where they were like, you know what, we don't want this to be a reminder to other teams that they can kind of get more money from their conference. But I agree with you. I don't see the benefit of them joining the SEC. Like, if they were worried about the Big 12 blowing apart, I honestly thought that trying to jump into the ACC, the Big 10, or the Pac-12 made better sense. Because like you mentioned, you jump into the Big 10, you get back with Nebraska. I know Nebraska hasn't competed. Maybe that's what scared them off. But you're right there, new networks. You can kind of like build a path around the SEC and kind of just contain them to the Southeast. And then the Big 10 can just own the rest of the country, and I don't think the SEC was going to catch up to them. So I had some numbers just to throw this out there. Like, a lot of people are reporting that now the SEC is going to be unstoppable and all this stuff. They're not. Like, I don't understand where, and I know it's a lot of, like, ESPN owns all their rights, and so that's where a lot of people get their stories or whatever. But right here, because I had the numbers up. So right now, the Big 10 for this year, I believe, every school's making $54.3 million. It's almost $10 million more than every SEC school. That it's at 45.5. So there's a $10 million gap for each school from the Big 10 and the SEC. I don't think that Rutgers makes their full amount, though, so that might twist the numbers. I did see a projection where in 2025, when that deal's up, the Big 10 is going to be making 80 to 90 million. So they're going to be making double the other three conferences. The SEC was below that somewhere, like 60 to 80, but they didn't have hard numbers. Now, obviously, adding Texas and Oklahoma will change that, so we don't have their numbers. The Big 12 was even lower at about 37 million to 40 million, somewhere in there, because, like I said, Texas and Oklahoma were making more, so they were probably making 40 million each. West Virginia and the rest make 37. The Pac-12 is in a world of hurt. They're at 33.6 million a school. I'm surprised if they didn't throw a last-ditch effort last week, because, you know, I'll get into it here in a second. And then the ACC is last. They have that split conference payout. So some schools make 30.9. The top earning schools, which I believe is like Florida State, maybe Clemson, 37 million. So some of them are up there with the Big 12. Others are not. That's why I'm surprised when the ACC already has that split money deal that they couldn't just convince Texas and Oklahoma to join. I think that they could have cherry-picked. I know you don't like the pod thing, but maybe they could have kind of worked it out where they join like a... Because the conferences already don't make sense, or the divisions don't make sense. So like you can throw them in with like Louisville and somewhere else just to try to give them an easy path, which whoever wins that game between Oklahoma and Texas is most likely going to be in the ACC championship on that side. I mean, you're going to the SEC. Are you realistically going to be in the championship game every year now? I don't think so. Like, I think this really hurts Oklahoma, to be honest.
Well, it depends on what side they end up putting them in, because as long as you're not in the pod side with Alabama, then you stand at least a reasonable chance of getting to the SEC championship game. Because you look at what Oklahoma's been doing, or not Oklahoma, but what Georgia's been doing. They had a couple shots there. It seems like that other side is kind of a crapshoot. I mean, you even had Missouri that played for it within the last 2 decades. So, I mean, you're getting some different teams cycling in and out. It's just Alabama's so good right now that they're almost slated unless they have a major issue that they're penciled into the SEC championship game. To me, when you look at the landing places, I kind of see where it made sense for those guys to join the SEC, because it's been a more open style of play that matches closer to what the Big 12's been doing. You know, you look at like with Lane Kiffin and with Kendall Briles and with some of those other offenses that are more spread based. for them to go to, even though dollar for dollar they may make more money in the Big Ten, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about Nebraska. I think they would have run into some major issues trying to go into the Big Ten because it just the style of play doesn't match up. And when you're going into Michigan and you're going into Wisconsin in December and November, that's not going to bode well for you. You know, you want to play those games down south where you're acclimated to those warmer temperatures.
Well, see, I think that whenever you're at that point where if things are going, like there seems to be a hint that everyone thinks that there's going to be smaller pods, I don't think that would be as big an issue as what you think, because it's not like they're going to be going up north all the time. All they would have to do is convince the Big Ten to add enough schools in their region, and then that's their region. So then they would only play one other region every year. Because like I keep hearing people think, oh, the SEC is going to add 18 teams. Do you know how big of a nightmare that would be? I mean, 14 is already a nightmare, but at least it's even enough scheduling-wise that they can have two divisions. The new rumored divisions are that Alabama moves to the east. So that kind of puts into your point where it does look like they have an easier path. Now maybe Alabama spits back and says, you know what? We want to stay where we are, and Missouri stays east. But here are the rumored ones. The West is Ole Miss and Mississippi State, LSU, A&M, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, and Oklahoma. So they're teaming back up with A&M and Missouri. And then I think the big one's going to be LSU. I think LSU's the big winner. Because before, they were recruiting heavily from Texas. There was no Texas team in the SEC. And going back to my point, because I don't think I actually finished. So I was looking for like TV network just to try to see, because I had the numbers. I know the Big Ten makes more money, but I was trying to see like how valuable are some of these schools. And I found an article written from like an A&M blog after they moved to the SEC, just showing how valuable the move was to them. So they jumped in TV viewership all the way to number 2. Like their first year. And it's, I mean, being in the SEC, the only team from Texas there, it's helped their recruiting. Like they jumped so high that like Texas viewership dropped off the map. And so like Texas came in that year at 26th overall, just in terms of TV viewers. And they had their own network, Matt. But if no one watches your network and you're like Texas, that should be one of the top 5 schools. And A&M clocked in at number 2. They were basically tied with Michigan, which Michigan was 7-6 that year. Which even their blog was like, how the hell is Michigan getting that many viewers? They suck. So it's Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. Like those are the top 3, and then A&M jumped up there with them. So like right now, I don't think that the move adding Texas, A&M already established themselves. Does it really move the needle? I know Texas is very valuable. But like you said, I think it kind of hurts them.
I think Texas is valuable when Texas is up. And, I mean, maybe I'm going to give Sarkisian the benefit of the doubt because he's fresh out of Saban's coaching rehabilitation school. But they have to prove that they truly are, quote, back. Because they've been saying it for a long time, and they're not. And they're barely a 500 club. And I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to hold them back in the long run, is that if they prove that they couldn't win in the Big 12 and then they go to the SEC and they're getting pissed whipped by everyone in the SEC, it's just going to make things so much worse, especially when you have A&M that's established.
Well, see, that's why I thought that they could shift out of it. I don't think the ACC, to be honest, would have been a smart move, because that's too much overlapped recruiting grounds with the ACC, and the ACC is viewed as inferior. I mean, they don't make as much money, they don't have as much viewership, so like I think it would be hard for Texas to recruit. But I think either if knowing A&M jumped first and they had that big bump from the SEC, if Texas looked at it and said like the Big Ten, we're going to be the only Big Ten team, we have the most money, we can market ourselves as a team, they instantly stop recruiting in-state against Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU. It really just comes down to Texas versus A&M. And to be honest, Michigan and Ohio State have been doing very well in Texas recently because Texas has been down. So players that don't go to the SEC have been coming up north. So I think that would have helped Texas. The other way would have been the original move that was rumored a decade ago was them going out west. And I think the thing that held them back is the Pac-12 didn't want too many teams in that time zone. But that would have opened Texas up to recruiting in California and pretty much the entire West Coast. So then they could have, I mean, that would have, I think, put them back on the map. Because, like, if USC struggles or whatever, it's very easy for Texas to go into LA and be like, hey, we're going to be playing here a few times. You should come to Texas. Like, it's great here. And, I mean, Austin's liberal enough that I don't think it would be a big culture shock. It's not like you're playing at Texas Tech or something that's, like, out in the boonies, you know? So those are the ones where I think what hurt Texas is A&M jumped. They started to steal recruits. Texas was still battling for the scraps amongst TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech. That's why I see these rumors now. It's like, oh, I can't wait. The Big Ten or the Pac-12 is going to immediately grab these other schools. Like, I don't know if they can or they will. Like, the two big Golden Gooses in Texas are already taken. Baylor and TCU are private schools. And so, like, I mean, we can get right to the Big 12 talk here now. So, like, the remaining options for the Big 12 teams, I don't think there are many. Like, I think a lot of them are just going to be begging. The original, like, Kansas and them, like, they said that they were blindsided by this. And I don't know if they have any options. So I'll give you your thoughts here. But the main rumor now is that Iowa State and Kansas have reached out to the Big Ten, and they check all the boxes because they're both AAU schools, which is like the research database thing. There's no way the Big Ten is going to add two schools in small markets, knowing that the reason their money deal got so big was because they added a gigantic school in Rutgers and another gigantic market in Maryland. Fans may hate the idea. They may hate the schools. But, like, I was looking through the list, like, Matt, cable TV is dying. So guess what's going to be the next trend? Streaming subscriptions. You're going to have to sell your conference. Like, right now, just looking at, like, alumni networks, Penn State, Indiana, Michigan State, UCLA, Ohio State, Cal, Rutgers, Texas, and then Purdue. So most of the biggest schools are Big Ten schools. So, like, if these schools want to keep making money, like, there's a reason why they added Rutgers. Rutgers is like a big sleeping giant. Sure, they bet on them, and they're saying, like, hey, the Athletics will have to come. We're going to give you more money than you've ever seen in your life. But, like, there really hasn't been a downside to them. You can't add only great schools. Like, the SEC's adding, like, Oklahoma that's been so great at football. The SEC is already good at football. What does Oklahoma give you that you don't already have? That's what I don't understand. Unless they took them because they were afraid they were going to lose Texas. And Texas is just so valuable. Because realistically, out of the money-making schools, Michigan and Ohio State are already in the Big Ten. Notre Dame's independent still. They've not really said anything about this. And then you have Alabama. The only other school out there is Texas. They joined the SEC, so it's basically 2-on-2 with Notre Dame out there. Where are they going to go? Like, are they going to join the ACC and maybe help boost them back up? I don't know. But what do you think for those other Big 12 schools? Do you think, like, the ACC would add them? Or the Big 10?
I think that there's a possibility for it, just from the sake that you don't want to be the last school to the table. And I think we kind of touched on this last week, that you have the golden goose of the Golden Dome in Notre Dame. So with some of these, like, I don't think that you rush to try to fill out, because I think you could look at, even if you're the ACC, I was thinking about this, why not add a Coastal Carolina and a Liberty? Because then you're still within that South Carolina,
that selfish
Virginia demographic. But I mean,
that's a selfish take to get Liberty in there.
It is, but I think it's a program that's on the rise. They have the funds. It's a program that they're going to fit somewhere. They're expanding at a rate that they're going to need a seat at the table somewhere. So do you want to be the last one in on them, knowing that at any point Notre Dame can sit everything out, and at the 11th hour, they can say, I want to join, and you name the conference, and they'll be a welcome with open arms.
Well, see, that's where I think the Big 12 schools, they're all panicking, and there's rumors that the AAC, like the lower one that has Cincinnati already, has kind of already reached out and said that we'll take some of you. And it's like, what are you doing? At that point, I think, to be honest, we don't know the direction of the playoffs yet. Like, that hasn't been settled. There's no rule that says that they're going to stay at 4. If they stay at 4 and the Big 12 eliminated itself, and now that there's de facto 4 big conferences because the Big 12 breaks up, guess what, Matt? That Oklahoma move is even dumber. Because you really think that they're going to leave out, like, when there's 4 conferences and they only have 4 spots, that they're going to leave another team out just to shove in another SEC team? No. Like, if USC gets back on top, they're not going to leave out Ohio State. Because those conferences with the big money, like, all they have to do is pack up and say, like, you know what, we're done. If you're going to try to shove 3 SEC teams in to a 4-team playoff, like, that's ridiculous. So they have to be posturing for the 12-team playoff, I would think. And at that point, the Big 12, stay where you are. And you're talking about Liberty being a private school. They already have private schools in the Big 12. That's my direction I think that they should go right now. They would have, 8 teams left? I think they should immediately try to go to 12. You contact Cincinnati, you contact BYU, and then possibly Liberty, and possibly maybe someone like App State. Schools that are relatively well-known and have winning traditions. Coastal Carolina could be one. Maybe you go the other direction. I keep seeing Tulane brought up, but I don't think that they have enough football tradition. Like, people know App State. The other wild card would be Boise State. Bring in BYU and Boise State. Bring in Cincinnati and either Liberty or App State. And then you're saying, like, look, we're going to bring some football teams around West Virginia. We're going to bring some football teams out west. Because people forget, BYU is a big Mormon school. They begged for the Pac-12, and supposedly the Pac-12 turned them down because they would not drop their rule of not playing on Sunday. The Pac-12 could have easily had more money if they added a national brand. I mean, outside of USC, UCLA, maybe Stanford at some level, but I don't think people are tuning in to watch Stanford. Maybe Oregon lately. They don't really have that big of a draw like BYU, or like you said, if you're going to be trying to get ahead of everything, add Liberty. It's one of the fastest growing. They're throwing money into the program. Why wouldn't you? You know? Like, I think that's what the Big 12 should do. I think they should double down. And to even back this up, 1988, West Virginia Mountaineers, they were independent, Matt. Because if it all falls apart, I really only care about West Virginia. And I'm really worried that they're going to be left out. And so right now, if the Big 12, if all those schools decide to go to the AAC, West Virginia should not do that. They should go independent. They played in the national championship game in 1988. They were independent. This was their schedule. Bowling Green, Cal State, Maryland, Pitt, Virginia Tech, East Carolina, Boston College, Penn State, Cincinnati, Rutgers, Syracuse. They could play that same exact schedule this year, and that's a very, very easy schedule, Matt. I mean, Penn State is probably their top. Pitt was also ranked. Pitt was the only ranked team they played that year. Oh, no, Syracuse was also ranked. And I think they won every game by double digits. So, until they lost in the national championship game against Notre Dame. Why not do that again? If the playoff is going to be 12 teams, or hell, the worry for the Big 12 is that it stays at 4 teams, and they just start picking the Pac-12, Big 10, ACC, and the SEC because the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma. But I don't know if that would be the case. So I think that they should just expand right now. And if it goes to the 12-team playoff, your conference is going to have an auto bid. Why would you give that up? Like, to me, that's what I would do. Like, Boise State, you've been wanting a seat at the table. You got one. And you also got the recruiting ground in Texas. I keep seeing UCF mentioned. I don't think that's a good idea, to be honest. But let's get on to you, because I also see them brought up for the ACC. So do you have any other thing else on the Big 12 before we go to the ACC talk?
No.
All right, so the ACC, I see a lot of panic down here because I live right in the heart of it. And Matt, I see some crazy ideas. Like you're talking about putting teams right there. I've seen them talk about, well, the ACC needs to instantly expand with Cincinnati and UCF. And I thought, why? What the hell are you doing? You already have two of the top schools in Florida. What would UCF adding them do anything? I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised that UCF didn't rebrand itself as the University of Orlando. Because it came out last time when they were doing the TV network deals that some memo leaked or something, and they said that they greatly discouraged adding directional schools because it regionalized their TV audience. So why not just make it Orlando? Orlando Magic, Disney's there. Like they could have easily rebranded and been like, you know what? Now we're available for the Big 12. And to be honest, if the Big 12 wanted to survive, maybe add Florida to get those recruiting grounds. I think that that's a big key for them right now. They still have Texas, but it's going to be second fiddle to the SEC coming in. So why not? For the ACC, though, it makes no sense. So I want to get your thoughts. What do you think the ACC should do next, and do you think they're in trouble?
I don't know that necessarily the ACC is in trouble, because if they end up continuing to expand to try to chase the SEC, I think what it does is it puts them in a more advantageous position, because the NCAA is going to try to do whatever they need to do to prevent the complete dissolving of the NCAA. And I know that primarily the big thing is the March Madness tournament that the NCAA puts on, and that a lot of it's kind of individualized. I think they're still going to want control over the schools and the alignments and some of that other stuff, that they're not going to want these Power 5 schools breaking off and doing their own thing and kind of picking and choosing where teams can and can't go.
So getting into this, and some of this I'm going to save for the Big Ten at the end, but I think the ACC right now, their best bet is to not do anything. But I would definitely talk to Notre Dame and see what they would want to do. Like I said, Notre Dame is one of the top 5 schools in money value, football tradition, everything. If Texas and Alabama have teamed up in the SEC and you have Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten, Notre Dame's the last school that's out there. If the ACC can reel them in, they stay relevant. If Dabo leaves Clemson and they take a downturn, guess what? Doesn't matter. You have Notre Dame. Florida State or Miami or someone can fill that void. But that's the one thing. Like the entire Big East, if you add Notre Dame and let's say, because West Virginia has been pushing for an ACC spot, if you could somehow convince Notre Dame and West Virginia, because I think West Virginia adds value. Right now, the ACC is, what were they, second lowest in TV money? Or no, they were the lowest, right?
I think.
Some of them. So not Florida State or the football schools, but some of them had the lowest payouts. And so you need to add a school that's going to bring value. Like adding UCF isn't going to help your TV contract. And if you just add more schools that don't increase that money, guess what? You have to split that lesser amount with more schools now. So that's where the Big 12, they're in panic mode. I think they should expand with powerful brands. I don't think the ACC should reach, they should not be grabbing Cincinnati. Let the Big 12 try to boost them up, you know? Because unless you were thinking realistically, hey, we need to start taking Ohio State down, because I think someone adding Cincinnati would take a big chunk out of there. Because right now they're unrivaled in their state. I hate when Penn State says that. But for real, they are the king in Ohio. So if some other conference, even if the SEC decided to grab Cincinnati, let's say, because there's rumors that the SEC's been asking Ohio State and Michigan if they want to join, and like I said, I don't think that they do, because right now you'd be leaving the Big Ten that has way more fans, just in terms of alums and TV eyeballs and everything, to go basically lock in Mississippi State and Ole Miss into this upper division that everyone keeps clamoring about. Why do they deserve to be there, but not Wake Forest? You know what I mean? Mississippi State's not bringing in eyeballs, Matt. So, like, I think if it truly, people think that the SEC is going to be the premier, they're going to kill the NCAA and only have one conference left. Like, I just don't see it. Like, I think if it did happen, it would be Alabama, Texas, Michigan, Notre Dame. They all just decide to leave with a bunch of their buddies. And I think teams from every conference would be left behind. But right now, if you're in the ACC, I saw, is it Jay Bilas? I don't know how to say his name. He's very, like, over-the-top ACC supporter, and he was practically begging on a video for the SEC to merge with the ACC. And I thought, why would they cut their money in half? Like, the Big Ten would be laughing all the way to the bank if that happened. Like, oh yeah, divide your smaller amount by 20 or 30 schools now, you idiots. Like, you already have the TV sets in Florida and South Carolina. Yeah, go ahead and double up. Sure thing. Yeah, we're really scared now. Because, like, to be honest, for the ACC, they're under, right now, contract with ABC and ESPN. The SEC and them just took the Fox schools, Oklahoma and Texas. I saw Oklahoma complaining about how they were in the money slot at noon on Fox all, like, 42 times or something like that for the past decade, and I thought, damn, that's a lot. Like, you think Michigan, Ohio State gets, like, that noon slot on ABC or whatever, but Oklahoma was, like, their cash cow for Fox, because, like, they weren't getting picked over by ESPN. Like, normally it would be Texas or someone else, and when Oklahoma didn't, Fox had all their games. If they join the SEC, Fox loses that. So how do you know that they're not going to throw an outrageous money bid at the ACC to get Clemson instead? You know? Or Florida State. Like, that's a good fallback, I would think. So, if I'm the ACC, stay put. Like you said, if the NCAA collapses, they're not going to leave, like, North Carolina and all their cash cows from, like, basketball just disappear. Like, they might be able to join a different conference, as I'll talk about, like, my Big Ten, which I think is probably what's going to happen. But right now, stay where you are. If Notre Dame doesn't want to join, try to position yourself to where they were. I don't think jumping on West Virginia is a smart idea, as much as I hate to say it because I want them to land somewhere. But, like, adding West Virginia and Cincinnati doesn't help you. West Virginia has the eyeballs. I don't know if it helps your money line, though. You know what I mean? They're a top 30 team in football and basketball, but does it really give you more money on ESPN? I don't know.
I think it helps in some ways if they brought West Virginia in, just to be able to put them in the Coastal and kind of have where Notre Dame's coming in. If they brought Cincinnati in and they brought West Virginia in, they could have some of that old Big East type alignment to the conference that now you have at least a little bit of marketing and branding that they can go off of with it. I mean, it's not, by no means is it an ideal situation, but it's something to build on.
You're directly right. If they would add them, and let's say, even if I think the timeline messed up last time with everyone panicking, and that's why I think that they should just wait a little bit. Because, like, West Virginia panicked and joined the Big 12 with TCU, and then the ACC had a spot open, and it went to Louisville instead. Like, I honestly think that the ACC would have added West Virginia back then. It made the most sense. And now, like, Louisville's kind of been a big loss for the ACC, I would think. Like, they've had a lot of off-the-field scandals. Haven't really been... I mean, they've had, like, a Heisman Trophy runner. He didn't win, did he? I can't remember. Did Bridgewater win that? But, like, other than that, like, they haven't really brought anything to the ACC except for controversy. So, like, if everyone on their high horse down here is like, oh, West Virginia wouldn't qualify. Like, what the hell? You guys brought in Louisville. What are you talking about? Like, who are you kidding at this point? Like, you wanted a basketball school. West Virginia, I think, qualifies. And so, like, bring them in. But what do you think for Florida State? Because I've seen some crazy predictions where people think that, like, Florida State gets left behind. And I've seen one where Florida State drops to a lower level and Miami stops playing sports altogether. So go ahead.
Well, I think some of that is also teams not wanting them to be in a positive light. And I think in particular Florida State, when you look at what they've done, I mean they've been a recent national champion. Take some of these other schools that, like Texas, and then hell, even Texas A&M, they haven't even been to the playoffs, but they have that hype train and the money train with them. They've in recent years they've struggled, but take the recent struggles out, the recruiting is improving. They're picking up some steam that I think that if they can manage to pull off I'm not even saying blow the doors off, but have an above average year, qualify for a bowl, and show the recruits that like they're not getting absolutely curb stomped. They're going to be a force to reckon with again, and I think they're going to be contending with Clemson for ACC supremacy. So I mean, I do think that they have to show that they're not just going to get the doors blown off them, because otherwise, all this recruiting momentum that they have right now is going to disappear.
And I have some extra thoughts on that, but I want to get into the Pac-12 because I think the Pac-12, my idea for them kind of impacts the rest. So the Pac-12 right now, they're in a horrible spot. Like, their leadership has been awful. They made a change. And now, like I had said, I think overall, consistently, they have the lowest payouts. They're the conference of champions. They have the most national championships, I think, in their entire conference. They win almost all the Olympic sports. Like, Stanford does very well in almost everything. They win the Directors' Cup almost every year. And so, like, you're looking at that and you're saying, like, okay, why are they out here? TV networks just don't care because they play at such weird time zones. Like, the Pac-12 After Dark, it's like a meme. But, like, that's for real. Like, some of their schools just, like, refuse to play any earlier for tailgating or whatever. And like, they throw it on there. It's like, all right, I'll watch this, but how many people are actually watching that aren't at a bar? So I don't know. If it was me and I'm in the Pac-12, I don't know if I expand either. Because like I had said, my argument with the Big 12, like, or the ACC, I mean, what you need to do is to draw more eyeballs to what you already have. Like, if you want to compete, like, the Pac-12 doesn't have a Clemson right now that's bringing them up. And so if I were them, and to the ACC, I think that they should pay attention to this. Because both conferences have already invested in TV equipment for all of their sports. It was part of the ACC deal and the Pac-12 network deal. So every conference member has the capacity to live stream all of their games. Are they all going to be professional quality? No. Like, are they going to have voiceovers or whatever? No. But I think directly what they should do is reach out to Netflix. Netflix looked into this almost a decade ago and said they didn't have the infrastructure for it. Now these conferences already have the infrastructure themselves. Netflix is looking into streaming games, so they have to have the streaming whatever capabilities. Netflix did not hit their subscriber whatever at their last stock option call or whatever it's called. So they had their big like public press conference or whatever. They didn't hit numbers. They're still bleeding subscribers. People aren't like staying subscribed. To keep them subscribed, give them a reason. Like, you would give a bunch of alums from the Pac-12 a reason to just stay subscribed if you left it up to each school. And I would strongly tell each school, like, stream all of your sports. Like, we'll add a Pac-12 label on the left side. You go there, you pick your team, and then it will show you that you have some option to watch some replays because Netflix has that built right in already. And then there'll be a schedule. Make it so easy to find, because if I've learned anything from watching the Olympics, NBC sucks so bad that I have no idea what the hell I'm watching. They show replays. Like, at least ESPN shows, like, for their replays or whatever, their historic games, they have the replay tag on there. Not NBC. I'm, like, trying to find the France game. It's not even listed on the NBC app as, like, an option or, like, hey, telling me, hey, you know what? It's on this channel. Nope. Nothing at all. Like, hell, buddy, I'm watching it on Twitter. Like, people are streaming it on Twitter. I don't have to look for your crappy NBC app to find it. Like, if you're going to make everything so hard for me, guess what? I'm not going to watch. I'm not. You text me about fencing. I'm like, I had it up, and I'm like, who knows what the hell channel that Matt's watching? I don't see fencing as an option. I don't know what you're watching, but I'm like, I don't even see that as an option. So I'm like, You've got to be kidding me. So I couldn't even text you back about fencing. I figured I'd just talk about it on the show. Because I'm like, I'm watching replays of like rowing that I had already looked up and ESPN had already published the winners. So then I'm like, why am I watching this? And I made that article, that comment earlier, like just if you're going to do the replay, do a replay supercut. Why am I watching dudes stretch out and do like their in-between rounds of rowing? Like there's zero reason for that except for laziness. Have a guy cut that up. Like you can hire an intern to cut video, Matt,
Well, I thought this too, and there's so many different, you say, and I cringe when you talk about streaming, because look at how many events that they've put into the Olympics, and for as many different sport, like they just have a channel that like you look at between NBC and USA, and I forget what other channels are even showing Olympic sports, but it's like, If there's something in particular you're looking for, you don't even know when it's on, because it's like at this time slot, it's either rowing and bicycling and badminton.
But Matt, that's what I'm talking about with the streaming. Like no one has gone all in except for guess who? The NFL. So the NFL's Thursday Night Football has not been good for ratings and stuff as we've seen. So they signed a deal with Amazon. I think it was like 2 years ago. I know we talked about it. And so they had told the TV partners, like, hey, we know you already paid for the TV rights. Our streaming rights are different. Like, you can stream it on your NBC app or whatever, but we're also having a dedicated streaming app to give our fans an option. So, like, you have the direct broadcast apps or whatever. Amazon's going to do their own broadcast. Or maybe they were even using NBC's. But I could watch it on Amazon Prime every Thursday night. And guess what? That's where I watched it. Because I didn't have to look around saying like, hey, who has Thursday night this year? Is it Fox? Is it CBS? I don't remember. Oh, it's NFL Network? Oh, yeah, I can't watch that at all. Oh, but I can watch Amazon, whatever. So I think the Pac-12 should say like, look, ESPN, shove it. You guys are paying the SEC and the Big Ten almost double what we make. Like, screw you. You can show our games, but that's for TV only. All of our streaming games, and if you want to stream it on ESPN 3 or whatever the hell you're calling it these days, fine. You can stream your own broadcast, but the Pac-12 schools are each going to do their own broadcast, and it's going to be on Netflix. So, Matt, because NHL and like MLB do this for all their games, it's called the Homer Stream. So, like, you would get the radio call for Florida State as you watched it, and every single game that was on there would be the radio call for Florida State. It would basically be the same exact camera footage because ESPN is running it through the school anyway. So you would get the home field camera footage, but it would be whatever school you're watching through, their radio guy. Sometimes they only have one radio if it's like a neutral site game or something, but for the most part, like Major League Baseball lets you pick your stream. And I think that would be a big win for them. Like negotiating with ESPN and Fox and all them, guess what? It hasn't been working. Like it's not working. In 2025, when this deal is up, the Big Ten and the SEC, I mean, especially the SEC, because they might even be making more than the Big Ten, they're going to make double, if not more than that, than these other schools. And I honestly think, for recruiting purposes, if the Pac-12 and the ACC went with like Netflix or something, and they had a part where like you can watch softball, like it was like in a weird time, like trying to watch Florida State softball, it's on whatever, you wouldn't even have to. You could just go to Netflix and say like, you know what, I want to see what Florida State's up to today. Oh, they have a badminton team? Cool, I'm going to watch that. Or like, oh, they don't have any games. Like at least you could get in the habit of saying like, oh, I'm already signed into Netflix to see if Florida State was playing. I guess I'll watch one of their other recommendations. And then you never leave their app. Like get me on the phone with Netflix because I'll tell them how to do it because the Big Ten app sucks too. But to be honest, that's the only way I think the Pac-12 survives. What are your thoughts on it?
I have to agree with you on it. I mean, I don't know any other way around it.
Because, so for my last topic, the Big Ten options for expansion, everyone thinks that there's going to be, now there's going to be 4 super conferences. It makes so much sense. The ACC and the Pac-12 are not just going to sit back and watch the other 2 conferences make over double the money that they have. And then they each have like brand new weight rooms. Like you've seen some of the state-of-the-art things that these schools pull out there. Like Maryland, when they're in ACC, they were cutting programs until they joined the Big Ten. Now they have like these Under Armour facilities that I think ended up, like, the coronavirus might not have been able to make them afford it or whatever, but, like, at least they're trying. Same with Rutgers. Like, you really think that those Pac-12 schools are going to afford that? Like, they're not going to compete. And if they make it into the playoffs, it's going to be almost like a play-in game, unless, like, you get a strong USC team or a strong Clemson or Florida State. Like, if Notre Dame gets in, like, they've been getting blown out. And if they're the de facto ACC rep, and then, like, what, Oregon? Did Oregon get a win that year? Didn't they beat Florida State, though? Maybe I shouldn't have brought them up as an example.
Well,
Washington.
I mean,
Washington was in. They got killed.
But look at, like, if you're looking at teams to help you out, like, pulling in, just from that financial standpoint, pulling in an Oregon or someone like that, I think might give you a little bit of draw.
Well, see, that's where I think the Big Ten expansion options, like, obviously between them and the SEC, they're making the most money. They're pulling teams in. They can have their pick. Like, I was looking, too, at basketball, because everyone's talking about, SEC is so dominant now. In all of the tournament team, like, records and stuff, the only SEC teams that even register are Florida and Kentucky. The rest of them are ACC and Big Ten with, like, some Pac-12 mixed in, like UCLA. You know what I mean? So, like, as I'm going through this list, if I'm looking just in terms of basketball, like, the SEC won't own basketball. Like, Alabama has the most tournament appearances, or one of the most appearances, without reaching a Final Four. So does Missouri, Tennessee. Oh, wait, am I reading an SEC team list? Like, okay. So, like, you're telling me that the SEC is going to dominate all sports? Like, no, they're only going to be good in football still. Maybe baseball. I've seen a bunch of articles about how baseball is going to be really big now in the SEC. Like, it's been really big in the SEC for the past decade. Hasn't mattered. Like, South Carolina was winning it. Mississippi State, I said, was basically, they were making no draw. They won it this year over Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt beat Michigan into the championship. So, like, they've been winning championships in baseball. Has it raised a needle for them? No. So, like, the one big thing, like, I brought up the AAU, there's not a lot of options for the Big Ten. So I don't know if they're throwing that out as smoke and mirrors. Like, Iowa State and Kansas are both AAU members. So is Missouri. Because Missouri last time, they came out and said, hey, Big Ten, we want to join. And the Big Ten was like, no. And then Missouri said, but we already quit. And then the SEC ended up taking them. Because there were rumors that they were going to take Oklahoma last time. Like, that it was going to be A&M, Oklahoma, and then the rest. But Oklahoma chose to stay with Texas, and then Missouri had already quit, so they just grabbed them, and then Colorado left too. So, like, Kansas could have left then. I don't think the SEC would have took them. But, like, I still don't think the Big Ten's going to take them, unless they're trying to do, because the Big Ten had this thing where they were trying to keep all of their states connected. So if you look at their map, if they don't add Missouri, or actually, you have to add Kansas, really. Or maybe you don't, because you already have Nebraska. And so that touches Colorado. So you could add Colorado, Utah, Arizona. Those are all AAU schools from the Pac-12. UCLA, USC, Stanford, Oregon, and Washington. Like, those are all them. So, like, all the other state schools, they would be gone in this Big Ten. The only other schools on the East Coast, though, are Virginia and UNC, I think, that have big programs. And then, of course, Florida and the two Texas schools, A&M and Texas. But, like, if they're going to go to the SEC, I don't think Florida or the two Texas schools leave. So the Big Ten, if they added those Pac-12 schools, I think that makes sense. But they can only cherry pick. Like, you can't add Oregon State and Washington State. You have to say, like, sorry. Iowa State, like, we already have Iowa. I'm sorry, but we're not taking you. That's one less share that you're not going to be pulling your weight. And I'm sorry if you're fans of those schools. But, like, they're gone. And then you would have a conference that goes all the way from New York. I saw someone map it out. And so if they added all of those schools, it's like 20-something, 24 maybe. I don't know, because I might have missed some schools in my count. Maybe if they cut some out, they could get to 20, like if they didn't add Arizona. But I think Arizona's needed to touch if they're going that option.
Well, you have to watch,
I don't know.
Because some of those states, like they may have, like, the legislation in place where they have to play that, like, Oregon State game, or they have to play
They're
Like,
still
if
going to play those games because I saw this prediction too, where someone was saying, "Hey, the Big Ten should expand and they should go to a 10-game conference." Stupid. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. They need to copy the SEC and do an 8-game conference, or if they end up going to 20, because like you got to remember, Notre Dame's not on this list either, and I don't think that they would say no to Notre Dame just because they know that would be such a big grab that would pretty much keep them on the SEC level no matter what. Like the SEC is not going to be able to claim its own national champion if it doesn't have Michigan, even like Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Like you just can't claim it. Like USC. Could you imagine? We'll go back to the days of 2 national champs, Matt. Whoever wins like the expanded Big Ten and whoever wins the expanded SEC, like that would just be stupid. Plus like those other schools that are left behind. But in this, if they're going to go 18 doesn't make sense, but I could see 20 working, and I know you hate the pods, but if you put them in regional groups of 5, you could play your entire group, that's 4 games, and then one other entire group, that would be a 9-game schedule, a round robin, and then you would rotate those each year, so you'd play every team in your conference every 3 years, and then you'd play them home and away every 6 years. And so I could see that working.
But I see part of this is that, like, I don't hate pods, but I feel like with the more that you expand, it almost becomes the cheap answer, because collapse all of the main Division I program, and you look at the playoff format, like and I know that it's expanding and it's going to expand, but look at the number of seats that they have. They have right now there's 4 main spots. So if you take the Southeast, the Northeast, the Northwest, and the South and the Southwest, you have 4 regional pods.
Yeah, but that Southwest is gone now, man.
But I'm just saying, like when you take all of those schools, if you're clumping everyone into 4 groups, you know, if we're looking at something really radical in the future, where you have a lot of these conferences aligning, and it no longer has some of those rivalry games are as meaningful, then having 4 spots and having those 4 main groups to be, you know, whether you have it as the Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC, or Big 10, SEC, ACC, and Pac-12 or Big 12. If those are your 4 super conferences, and then you just say the winners of those 4 automatically get your bids, then that's where your 4 main groups come from. And I think that's where your soccer comparison comes in, that you're a bottom feeding team. Okay, you drop down to one of these other conferences. The winning conference of the AAC bumps into, you know, one of the power conferences.
Yeah, but see, I'm thinking that the 4-team playoff isn't here to stay. Like, I honestly think the SEC expanded because they know that the 12-game or 12-team, possibly 16-team playoff is inevitable. And so, like, if they go to 16 and there are 10, or maybe if everything consolidates to 8 conferences, you get your 8 auto bids, and then those other 8 spots are going to be filled just like the NCAA basketball tournament, where it's all Big Ten and SEC, or ACC, I mean, except now the ACC is going to be the SEC in football. So you're going to have, USC was close, so they're in. Oh, wait, was that Michigan that's close? They're in. Penn State, yeah, definitely had them. Oh, Texas and Oklahoma, cool. LSU, awesome. All right, that's our playoff. And then all those other conferences that are left, considered the lower level, they'll take their auto bid, but they're only going to get one team. Like Gonzaga, like that's going to be you're going to be the rep. And Oklahoma gave that up by going to the SEC now. Now they have to battle, and they're gambling on a potential at-large bid over winning the conference to get that one auto bid, knowing that their conference might have only gotten 1 or 2 bids a year compared to maybe 3 or 4 from the other conference. And so that's where I think, and the pods for me is only for travel. And that's where I think the Big Ten really has to, like, if you're having like states touch, you can have a pod maybe in the middle of, like, okay, we added Colorado, Kansas, Iowa's there, Nebraska, maybe Minnesota. Like those 5 teams, they're in the pod. And I honestly think that they should do it for basketball too, where you play them twice. So I think that they should keep the pods the same for football and basketball instead of having one gigantic, like you said, soccer where you're playing all over the country the entire time. Like, no, you need those rivalries. Like, if you had a pod in basketball on the other side where it was like Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Indiana or something, and I know my pods don't really match up right now because I'm doing it on the fly, but like you need those rivals that you're playing in and out of football every year. So like your pod has to have at least one regional rival or 2, and no crossover games. The crossover games are dumb. I keep seeing people say like, well, you know, Ohio State needs that Illabuck game with Illinois. Like, no, they don't. That's the biggest ripoff in sports right now. Ohio State gets it a guaranteed rivalry win. Like, that's bullshit. No wonder Michigan always has one extra tough game. At least Notre Dame pieced out, which NBC can't be happy about because Notre Dame's TV ratings have been down. And I can't believe, like, their TV partner that you're going to be negotiating with, and you go tell them, like, hey, why did you cut that game with Michigan that always gave us top ratings? Oh, well, yeah, you know. We added Boston College, though. And they're going to say, like, what the hell? That'd be the SEC's answer to an ACC merger. Like, we don't want Boston College. Are you serious? So, like, a merger would only be whichever teams they cherry pick. And that's my final thoughts on this for right now. I'm actually thinking of changing our YouTube to be more visual instead of just doing the podcast, so you can listen to the podcast. And if you want more video content, because some of this stuff is hard to do on podcasts, I'm trying to do it audio without like using visual aids. But I'm thinking of putting together some video stuff. So if you want to check that out, make sure you follow us. Go to our website, southboundsports.com. I'm doing some updates so you can see the videos right there as I get them up. But that's going to be, I'm going to do, I think, a whole series on realignment as we find out more. Because I honestly don't think it's a good deal for Texas and Oklahoma right now if they jump next year. Until that playoff expands, they're really limiting their chance. Like Oklahoma has 4 appearances. They will not have 4 appearances in the next span of whatever year it was, 7, 8 years. They're not going to have that many appearances. That's my final thought on expansion right now. You have anything else, Matt?
No, I do agree with your thoughts that for the remaining teams, the SEC pulled the rabbit out of their hat and pulled 2 super teams into the league. Don't feel, if you're one of the other programs, don't feel the pressure to have to make a decision and then rushing into a deal that ends up being bad. I think there is time that if teams are patient, let the dust settle and it'll work itself out.
Yeah, Gonzaga has shown that the small conference is the way to go. Like, there's no downsides to it. Like, look at the Big Ten. Sometimes you have Wisconsin in the national championship game. Sometimes you have Michigan. Maybe Michigan State there, Ohio State. Like, you're constantly battling. Gonzaga's showing that, like, hey, we are the school. We're either good enough to get there, or most of the time we're at least going to be in the tournament, like expanding our recruiting. These conferences see how successful the NCAA basketball tournament is. So I don't think that they're just going to cut out the rest of those schools because you're losing states all over the country. Like, if the Big Ten had to pick and they end up not picking with Washington or Utah, like, do you really think that college football fans wouldn't want them in, like, the Mountain West Conference? Like, I still think the Mountain West Conference, if they expand the playoff, is going to have an auto bid. And I think that that's going to be their consolation prize. Are they going to make as much money? No. But they can still sell a ton of merch. Like, they're decent-sized schools with a big following already. Like, they're not going to be as big as those other ones. But, like, what's the difference if, like, the Mountain West Conference championship game is between, like, Boise and Washington then? And then they're getting the auto bid. Like, you're still going to have that chance to make the playoffs. You just won't be getting all the at-large slots, which I think is what is up for grabs right now. So I think people are like, they think that they're just going to break off and do their own championship, but, like, you're losing all those TV sets in, like, these other states that people usually only watch their own school. So if you cut them out of the playoff, like, if the SEC only did their own small regional playoff in the Southeast, the viewership is going to drop. Like, I guarantee it. People just aren't going to care to see Texas play Alabama for the 12th time. They're just not. You see it with Alabama and Clemson, Matt. Like, you got to give them an underdog to root for. And so that's where I think they're looking at it and saying, like, okay, give these smaller conferences a seat at the table because we need to leech money from them. We still need warm-up games. Like, could you imagine a 16 game or whatever with playoffs and everything, SEC only schedule?
Well, that's what cracked me up was that Paul Feinbaum was saying, well, what's your favorite matchup going into the season or going to be? And it was like, well, if Oklahoma and Texas are playing an SEC schedule, they're going to play like some like Division III school during those games because it'll probably be before their rivalry game anyhow. So like,
yeah,
outside of the games in their conference, they're literally playing high school programs for the rest of their schedule.
Yeah, they're not going to give that up. Like, I mean, there's going to be more money in it, but I'm telling you, people are going to be fatigued. So they really have to be careful here because they don't want to forget. And then some schools also have to be careful because I could very easily see Michigan and Notre Dame doing something stupid and becoming the Ivy League where they're forgotten. And people are like, yeah, I remember them. They used to play big-time football, like Yale and Harvard, man. Like, could you see that? Like, same with the ACC. I could see some of them being like, oh, West Virginia, we don't need you. And then slowly the SEC adds one school that, actually wants to join. And so, like, Duke and UNC get forgotten. They add NC State. They just do, like, a zipper. They add Virginia Tech. Because I could see the Big Ten doing that, too. Big Ten adds, like, Virginia and North Carolina. The SEC counters by adding NC State and Virginia Tech. And so then they're like constantly competing not only in the playoffs or whatever, but then they're competing in like recruiting and stuff. And then schools like Duke, they might be gone. Like if it ends up being two conferences and they create like a Super Bowl where you have like the NFL and the AFL, that could be trouble for the Pac-12 if they don't expand west far enough. So maybe they're going to be proactive. Maybe they grab Arizona and try to pull in USC. Because then that would give them coast-to-coast coverage, and I think that the Big Ten, if the Big Ten doesn't get USC, I think that they are really going to be pigeonholed. And while they might make a bunch of money, like I think then they get into a scenario where like it seems like the AFC wins the championship all the time, except when Tom Brady flips. Like that's going to be what the SEC does. Like the Big Ten might be there, but they'll just lose every year. And so it'll be like, oh yeah, you guys were in that championship game, remember? Or like the NBA where the West wins all the time. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember. I guess the East won this year, though. So I did have one other thing because I know we're probably going to go long because it was expansion. But for my final bell, dude, did the Big Ten Network 10K. I shaved like over 10 minutes off my time from last year. Still not as good as where I want it to be. I actually did when did I do like my test run? It was like in May. I did slightly slower than that. But it's because I think I ran it. I ran the test run at the beach, which is just completely flat. I did it up here around my 8 kilometer, dude. My calf went, so I've been limping around like an idiot after. But I couldn't stop because at that point I was like, all right, because there's so many hills. So I looked at the map and it's like every time there was a hill, my pace just went right down. But it brings up what I wanted to talk about because I told everyone before that I'm using the Garmin like Coach app. And so when I did my calculations, I noticed that most of my workouts were at a much slower pace than what I wanted to do. So like I was trying to get under an hour, but most of the workouts were at an hour and like 10-minute pace, which is what I was at. So then I was like, shit, like it never increased in speed even though I was hitting those goals. So I think that my body just kind of got used to going that slower pace. And even though I started regular, as soon as like kilometer 7 and 8 hit, I was just done. Like I was complete toast. So if you're doing something like I don't know, I was just following the watch. Compared to last year, obviously I'm in better shape. And I took the winter off, which this year I'm not going to do. And so I think I'm going to rotate and run a 5K next, or at least do a 5K training on here with a different coach to see if they take a different approach. But I'm going to try to jack up my pace to see if it gives me faster workouts or where they got those pace from. Because I really didn't pay much attention as I was working out. I thought, oh, well, he knows my pace because you said it at the top, that like the speed would keep increasing or something. But when I look back at my workouts, I'm like, I guess I should have been paying attention more. So that's my update on that. Definitely, if you're trying to get in shape, keep trying. Like, I mean, now with things still being like shut down, everything's up in the air. Some states are like even talking about shutting down more. Like, just do some workouts, eat healthy, get in shape. I'll keep doing it, talking a little bit about it on the show. But that's what I've learned from this run. Trying to make some adjustments to where Now, instead of just pushing myself on race day, I'm going to try to increase my speed beforehand and try to really max out. But my workout program, if you have the Garmin, I think it was Greg I used. I don't know all the coaches. I picked a different guy this time. I don't know his name because I didn't do it yet because my calf has been bothering me. So I didn't want to start working out right away. I'm giving myself like a day or two because I ran it on Monday, which was yesterday. So that's my update. Matt, you have anything for the final bell?
Nah. Well, I'm going to pass this week again.
I know we went long. There was North Carolina, their high school association has been looking to rebrand their sports so that instead of having a separate entity, they're going to bring it underneath. So we might be talking about that in a couple coming weeks. I don't want to stay super long to talk about it. But to me, it seems like something where I think the direction of high school sports, and even like in college when you're talking about like paying players, it makes sense to have everything under one entity that controls everything. But I'm worried that as we watch the Olympics and the United States seems to be struggling in some of these sports where we're like, oh, we're expected to win and we're not winning gold, that I just have a feeling that more and more cuts are going to be made. And like eventually the stories are just going to be like, oh yeah, football's gone anymore. And so like in 20 years, football could be totally different and all these conference moves could have been for nothing. Because like all it takes is for one government entity, Matt, that takes over sports to say, hey, you know what? We can only play flag football now. And then that's the end. So, sad final bell, but you got any thoughts on that before we go?
Yeah, and that's kind of why I want to do some more research on this as well, because the concern that I have, and I witnessed it firsthand last year, is that the governor just decided literally days before the opening of camp that it was like, no, I decide no, we're not gonna play football, and just shut everything down on a whim. And I just don't like leaving that in the government's hand. I like having an outside entity being able to follow, not making rash decisions on a pivoting notice.
Well, that's why I don't think, just my final thought to wrap this up, like I don't think that like if the SEC basically cut off a bunch of states, they lose that type of lobbying like across the government to like get other high schools to play. And guess what? If kids aren't playing sports like football, they're not going to watch it. And so like you're effectively killing your sport if you don't continue to allow schools from every state to be in the hunt for your championship. And so I think that's where they have to be very, very careful, because it's much easier for kids to say, you know what, I want to join a Mortal Kombat tournament instead of playing football this year. And they just sit around at their house and play Mortal Kombat for 20 hours. And then the parents are like, good, I don't have to drive you to all these games. Perfect. Play Mortal Kombat or play Call of Duty. Play Street Fighter. I don't know which ones have the best fan following. League of Legends, I know that does a pretty good one. So like it's going to be like, yeah, play Rocket League. Play any of those video games. So that now I don't have to drive you to events unless it's like an actual event. You can practice remote. And then that's it. And then high school say, you know what? That's cheaper. Boom. Why you're not going to get sick, dude, if you're in your own cubicle playing your own Xbox, like much safer. So we're going to hit back on that. I'm going to do some more research, but that's my fear. And it would be hilarious if the SEC went all in on football only to have football just be canceled. Because I always see articles about like people getting hurt, people dying at football practice. You never see that about other sports. You never see it about other sports. So there's a political agenda there. And, I mean, we're basically doing a football show now, so be very bad for us. So thanks for listening. Like I said, going to be doing some more visual stuff, I think, for our YouTube channel. But you can always find our stuff at southboundsports.com. So check that out. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.